Hi, I'm Nathan. I go by Peteparker, and every week I do comic book reviews because that's the rule around my house. If I want to keep buying them, I gotta review them. So this is going to be the review for Red Skull Incarnate number 2, written by Mr. Greg Pak and drawn by Mirko Kolak. I hope I said that right. And colored by Matthew Wilson, and the cover is done by David Aja. And these covers are awesome. They're what, of course, first drew me to the series. But what has kept me in the series was the little explanation of where the series came from by Mr. Pak at the end of the first book. So for those of you that don't know, this is a second series from Mr. Pak about kind of World War II-esque Germany. The last one was the Magneto Testament, where we got Magneto's real first name and childhood kind of brought up. And this one is more explaining the Red Skull's childhood, which is very different. Of course, I mean, that only makes sense, right? The Red Skull's a super evil bad guy, and Magneto's only a slightly evil bad guy, a misunderstood bad guy even. So this book is again great, just like the first one. The writing in it, the talking, the conversations are so quiet and subtle that I find myself trying to put my own self into this kid who is Johann Schmidt, in his position to see if I would make similar decisions or if I can empathize with what he's going through. I think a lot of times when you have a main character in an origin story like this, even if they're terrible in the end or they end up being, a mass murderer or whatever, you want to see that they had some good in them at some point early on and that something triggered that. But that's not necessarily the case here. And I could see this being a very, very difficult thing to write because you have to be subtle enough to kind of not make somebody empathize with him, but also show that he's kind of crazy, and also show that it's always been there, his need for, whatever, to be in charge and where that grew from and stuff. So, I think that's part of the brilliance of this series, really, is that the conversation is so light and realistic, and the actions that happen in here are not stuff that you can easily relate to. So you can't obviously look at the character and say, yes, I definitely do that, or, oh, yeah, that's why he's all messed up. It's not that. It's so subtle. It's like a combination of just the person that he is naturally, along with the advice that he's gotten and guidance that he's gotten over this time. Now, interweaved with this story, of course, what everybody really raves about is the historical significance. There's a lot of extreme detail, attention to detail as far as what time period this is taking place in, what's happening in that time period, and in the area, too. I mean, that is the claim to fame on these two series, is how accurate they are historically. And while I can't really speak to that all that much, I do find it very interesting that some aspects that you don't hear about in early World War II Germany is brought up in here through kind of casual observation, as well as just life happening at that time. You really can understand like a story happening during this time with some historical aspects threaded in. Now you do get a little bit of expose, I guess is what it's called, where he writes out what's actually happening, that's happening outside of the Red Skull's town or whatever, and what leads into what's happening in this town. Which makes sense, because if a bunch of Nazi troops just rolled into this town and started, picking fights with people, it wouldn't be really obvious why that was happening, but there's actually historical significance to those events. And seeing that behind the actual story that's happening kind of makes you remember that all of this is actually like happening. There were people there living there, and this is similar to how their lives were. Possibly it's always fiction, and that's what's so great about this entire series is you're not just reading a guy with a red skull, going crazy with the cosmic cube and making the world changed over or whatever. You're reading like a real story that could have really happened, and threads into everything else. And you're also learning, like how a psychopathic killer kind of gets their roots. How it's not purely from one thing or another, but it's a culmination of a combination of effects that actually pushes them that direction. One thing that's also really interesting to me about the Red Skull in general is, like, later on, yes, he's kind of different. He's very villainous. He's very controlling, but he's not really like completely insane. He's within the boundaries of actual working. I mean, he got up to a level where he was very trusted by the head of the Nazi armies, right? And he's the right-hand man, and obviously put in charge of a lot of things. And he was smart enough to always go toe-to-toe with people like Captain America. And you always hear about plot lines where he was very in control and knew what his actions were and exactly what he was doing. So that's another part to this that I haven't fully seen or understood from the kid yet, is that he's got a very clear and narrow path that he's getting to. And I can see that developing over time, but I really, that's what I'm expecting to see at some point, is that he's very concise and goal-driven, really, because that's how he ends up being. And I would hope that by the end of this series that's going to come about, because we do have 3 more awesome issues coming up. But even if not, this is a really well-done just a story about a boy who's going to grow up, who happens to grow up circumstantially in a really terrible area at a terrible time, and he's going to grow up to become a really terrible person. So it's very interesting, and it's much deeper than it looks, and the art, of course, is beautiful and is really worth looking at. So if you're interested in any kind of, this is like a deep kind of mainstream comic. If you're interested in anything like that, then you'll really enjoy this. And hell, if you aren't interested in that kind of deep level story kind of stuff, you still should look at this just because of the artwork, because it's great. So there you go. I'm going to give it another 5 out of 5 for the Red Skull #2, Red Skull Incarnate #2. If you're not reading this, you should read it. It's very good. So there you go. If you like this review, want to check out some other ones done by me, look for reviews done by Peteparker. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm starting to put them out that way too. I'm Peteparker on Twitter. And then elsewhere, you could just follow me on YouTube under Spidey207. But other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.